Today is Thursday, December the 2nd, 2010.
Hang on a second, Dave. There we go. Go ahead.
Today is Thursday, December 2, 2010. This is the start of an interview with Mr. Walter Tomsic. Is that correct?
Close enough.
Ah, it'll get better. At the RSVP offices of Catholic Services at Macomb, located at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan. Mr. Tomsic is 80 years old and was born February the 1st, 1930. Mr. Tomsic currently resides at 24360 Loretta, Warren, Michigan. My name is Dave Brousseau and I will be the interviewer, and Marilyn Redlicki will be the videographer. Walter, would you state for the record the branch of service that you served?
I served in the U.S. Army and I was a Sergeant First Class. My serial number is 132-89986, which I still remember. And I am a Korean War veteran.
All right, let's go back to the beginning. Perhaps in your later high school years, you can give us some background about you and your family.
Well, I was born on the 1st of February in Folsom, Pennsylvania, which is located about 35 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The town was incorporated in 1798, and the main industry was clay mines, brickyards, and steel. The population was about 450, with a mix of Poles, Croats, Serbs, Italian, and English. I'm a minor son. I was the only boy of four children, and I was second in the pecking order. Both my parents immigrated from Poland in 1920, and I attended Folsom Public Schools, where one teacher taught 2 grades. I also attended New Brighton High School, as Folsom only had 8th grade. After graduating from high school, I worked in one of the 3 brickyards as a laborer. My dad wanted me to go to college, but I didn't know what endeavor to have pursued. I had enough of school and I didn't want to spend my dad's hard-earned money.
I got a question for you. What was it like being a boy in a family full of girls?
Well, one would think that that would be preferred because being the only boy, but that wasn't the case. I grew up during the Depression and people had little or nothing, and our family was pretty much self-sufficient. We had chickens, we had a large garden, my mother canned a lot, and we had fruit trees, so we were pretty much self-sufficient. The only thing we needed is the basic necessary things from the grocery store, flour, sugar, and what have you.
How big a spread did you have?
I would think in our house was probably about 1/4 acre.
Okay, so you were a truck farmer.
Well, not really. We used pretty much everything that we made. That's all. You know, I was born in a house that was even smaller than that, and it had no front yard and very little backyard. But my dad always managed to raise chickens, so we ate a lot of chicken.
But you didn't raise cows.
No, we didn't.
So you were a vegetarian type of farmer.
Well, I suppose so. We had a lot of vegetables and fruit and raspberries and pears and apples and things like that.
How far away was school?
Well, Folsom Public School is walking distance. New Brighton High School was about 4 miles away, and we had to take a bus. The bus line was a hilltop bus line, and we had we bought tokens. The tokens were 7 cents a piece, I think it was at the time. But, the thing about it is, if you missed the bus, you had a long trek to go to high school, and I did that a few times.
Was this one of the situations where you were in one building and you had several classes, or was it a more traditional school?
Well, actually, the Folsom Public School had 4 floors and an auditorium on the upper floor. And the 2 grades were on 1 floor, first and second, third and fourth, fifth and sixth, and seventh and eighth. It only went to the 8th grade.
You get out of school, and as you explained, your dad wanted you to go to school, go on to school.
Right.
But I guess you just weren't ready at the moment.
I really wasn't ready. I really had enough of school after 12 years, and maybe 13 years, because I think I flunked the 3rd grade.
Okay, you were born in 1930, so this would have put you, what, 1944?
Well, you know,
When you got out of high school?
oh, it's 48. I graduated
48,
in 48.
okay, that's right.
I graduated in 48, and I worked as a laborer in the brickyard. And what I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And I have to say that I really contemplated my next step in life. I really.
Was there any pressure at that point about the Korean conflict?
Well, it wasn't even known at that time.
Okay, so there really wasn't any pressure
1948, no.
that you were gonna get drafted?
No, I think I heard about an inkling of the draft about
Yeah.
that time, but I wasn't quite sure about it.
Mhm.
But my next step was, what was I going to do with my life? And I thought perhaps the service would be the next step, and it'd be an answer to give me time to contemplate what I would do the rest of my life.
Was that step into the service something men, boys like you typically looked at as an option to college to try to get things going to career?
Well, we never thought in those terms, really. I just thought about what was I going to do, because you know, you come from a small town, you don't have too many options, and I thought that a friend of mine at Doodles McDonald, that was a classmate of mine in high school, he was pretty much in the same boat I was, and we just thought we'd join the Army. Not the Army in particular, we just going to join the service.
Uh-huh. What got you into the brickyards?
Well, that's where everybody worked. I mean,
Really?
well, you have to understand that the element that came to this country in the 20s were generally farmers, which had no skills at all, and all they knew was just generally hard labor, and they didn't master the language. The only language they knew was their own home language, and so it was a way to make a living, really.
Did you speak any Polish?
I speak very little, and I understand it quite well.
At that time, did you speak?
Yeah, well, my folks used to talk to me in Polish, and I used to answer in English, and that's the way
Okay.
it was. And
Why didn't you end up in the mines?
well, my dad worked in the mines. That is just plain hard work, you know. And it's not that I want to ignore hard work, but when you worked in the brickyards or the mines, there was so many cars that you had to fill. There's so many in the brickyards. It's how many cars you had to load, and how many cars you had to unload, and how many wheelbarrows you have to wheel. And it was all piecework. It was hard. It was labor intense, is what it was.
So, arm or service was the best option, as you could see it, as a way of getting yourself on track into a potential career.
I think that's the way I looked at it, because it gave me time to reflect on what I really wanted to do in life, and I wasn't ready to do anything at that time.
Tell me about your choices. At the time, you weren't drafted, so you had some choices as to where you wanted to go. How did you make that choice?
Well, I think the choice was made for us. Doodles McDonald and myself walked into the recruiting office in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and the first recruiters were the Army. So I still feel that hook coming in, grabbing me and pulling me in. It wasn't the Navy or the Marines. I think we could have both joined any of those services, but It's just the way it was. And, we didn't care, just as long as we got into the service. We had no preference.
What'd you think about leaving home?
It wasn't very difficult for me to leave home, really. Well, it was, I wasn't homesick, let's put it that way, because my godfather owned a farm in Swickley Creek, Pennsylvania, and I spent a lot of the summers there. So it wasn't a matter of being homesick at all, and I'm an adventuresome type anyway, and I like to travel, so I thought that was being a good experience for me.
Okay, so you finished with your recruiting. Where is your first assignment?
Well, we were recruited in Beaver Falls, and we were inducted in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and from there we were transported to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, and we got our first GI chow there, and I felt kind of honored that the mess sergeant designated me as G-man. Well, I found out that G-men meant garbage, and I was the man, so that's my first assignment in the service.
Did you ever hear of the basic rule, never volunteer?
Well, I did after that.
Okay. So how did things go in boot camp?
Well, the cadre at Camp Breckenridge were all WW2 veterans, and our drill sergeant was a Sergeant First Class Henderson, and he was a career soldier. And after we changed from civvy for our GI clothes, the sergeant took us out for a march. Well, that was really something. They said, you look like a bunch of clods out there, the left foot from the right foot, and it just it wasn't very regimented. And then the sergeant says that, does anybody know how to make a right turn? Well, it's the second time I volunteered. And
Not learning your lesson yet, eh?
well, I did learn my lesson. But so I took the pivot point, and sure enough, the whole formation followed me.
Good for you.
And well, did I know how to do the right turn? Of course I did. I used to watch the National Guard, Pennsylvania National Guard guys go do the drills, the marching drills, and the presentation on arm. And me and Billy Cermak, my buddy at the time, were watching these soldiers marching, and one of them invited us in to march with them. So we checked out our Springfields or the shotguns, and we drilled with them. And that's how I knew how to do all the marching and do the presentation of arms.
How long were you in boot?
I think the course was about 2 months. I think it was 2 months.
4, 8, okay.
It was 2 months.
Any other experiences in boot that are worthy of comment?
Well, that was, since that experience I had, knowing how to do the right turn, the Sergeant Henderson made me a Lance Corporal. And I had 2 little bars on my helmet, and I was in charge of the barracks when he was absent. And I must have did a relatively good job, because the guys were all seemed to be satisfied. I had to meter out the punishment, the sleeping with their rifles or whatever it was, things like that. But he thought quite highly of me, and he thought I had a military potential, and he wanted me to go to infantry school. But I declined, and he was quite upset about it all.
Really?
Yeah, he was. And
What was your high school academic record like?
well, I was probably a C student.
Oh,
I would
really?
think. I wasn't distinguished in any way at all. I got through. That's about it. I was kind of an average type of a student. I played football, and I was always quite athletic, and that's probably one of the reasons why basic was quite easy for me. I was away from home with my godfather, so I wasn't homesick, athletic, and working in a brickyard, walking a half a mile, 6:30 in the morning, back and forth, and working as a laborer, so I was physically fit. So basic wasn't a challenge to me at all.
That must have been some cold winters, eh?
Yeah, well, Pennsylvania's cold and
Yeah.
there's a lot of snow too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you had to, well, I wasn't the only one. Most of the people in town worked in the mines or you worked in the brickyards.
So now you get out of boot camp, do you have any options that they gave you, or did they just tell you?
No, they give us an option. I think that some of the smarter guys signed up for various types of vocations, and Doodles and I, we like to travel, so we signed up for the Far East, and with hopes to get into go to
Whatever
Japan.
brought you to talk about the Far East?
Well,
Where in the world did that come from?
it did. We just thought that'd be a very adventuresome place to go. The land of the geishas, you know, Japan. Well, we didn't go to Japan. We went to Guam. We fell short by a couple thousand miles.
Honestly, when I came out of high school, the Far East didn't mean a word. I mean, didn't mean a thing to me.
I think it's very enchanting. The Far
Really?
East, yes.
Okay.
I used to look at read the National Geographic magazines
Oh, I
that
see.
my dad, not my dad, my godfather used to get.
What'd your mom feel about you leaving?
Well, you know, I kind of reflect back on that, and I really don't know. I think they didn't say a thing about it at all. I couldn't quite understand. I can't quite remember how they reacted to it at all. I think they accepted, because I was 18 years old. I was an adult, and I could do pretty much what I wanted to do. And I think they just accepted it. That's all.
So you end up in Guam.
I ended up on Guam. Yeah.
What's going on at Guam that you're gonna mature into a fearless fighter now?
Well, I'll have to tell you, and we got into this replacement depot with about 300 or 400 other guys, and it seems like everybody got got assigned to something except Doodles
Let
and
me
I.
take a step back. You were at Breckenridge. How did you get to Guam?
Well, we were on a troop ship, and
Well, you can't take a troop ship from Breckenridge.
no, well, we had
Train?
No, we did. We took a train. Yeah, we took a train, and on that train, the same train was the Pittsburgh Steelers were playing the LA Rams.
Ah,
And it was quite an experience. We sat down with a halfback called Shipley, I think it was. He was a very gracious type of a guy. And so we got to Oakland. In Oakland, from Oakland, we got onto a troop ship. A troop ship, well, there's a Pacific. The Pacific is a very passive type of ocean, so I did
when
get...
it's not mad,
Yeah, well, I did get sick.
did you?
Yeah, but you know, I laid on that bulkhead when we got away from the mainland, and I laid on that bulkhead and I looked at the sky and I said, you know, under different circumstances, this could be a pleasant trip. But
How long did it take you to get to Guam?
I really don't. We stopped at Honolulu for a couple of days, I think it was. I really don't recall how long it was, but it wasn't too bad of a trip. I got KP on that trip, as I recall, and I had these big kettles I had to stir around and all that stuff. And but I got a little smarter on my other trips, though.
Okay, so now you're in Guam, and I suspect you're gonna be assigned to something that will teach you how to...
Well, yes, as I said before, we were in this repo depot with 300 or 400 other guys, and Doodles and I were the only ones that weren't assigned anywhere to any unit. And we were there for about 2 weeks. I think they finally found us out. I was assigned to the Stars and Stripes as a librarian. Doodles got assigned to some clerical job someplace, I don't know really where it was. We stayed in the Perm Barracks in Guam, and we were assigned to Headquarters Special Troops, Marlborough Command.
What Stars and Stripes?
Stars and Stripes is the Army newspaper that
Ah,
was founded
okay.
back in, during the Civil War in St. Louis by a couple of Yankee soldiers. I started as a librarian through attrition where what happened, I was out for sports. I played baseball, football in the service. And Sergeant Jim O'Neill, he says, well, Walt, you're out for sports. Why don't you write something about the teams, about some of the guys in the team? So I did. And it wasn't too long after that, Sergeant O'Neill had a hardship case and he had went to the States. And so I just filled that position as a sports writer for the Stars and Stripes.
Okay. What else went on? Did you go to any schools?
Well, I did. I went to a typewriting school because I was a librarian, and what I really did is typed all these stories the reporters had, and they sent these stories to Japan. And then a few days later, we got the newspaper back onto, as they published them in Japan, they sent them to Guam, and they were distributed there.
What was going on in Guam at the time with respect to the service and our relationship in Korea? And
There was really nothing at that particular time. It was late '48, right after basic, and up to 1950. I was based the early part of the '50s. So it wasn't until I was off of Guam, and into the States at Fort Bragg that the Korean affair started.
okay, what was it like in Guam? Did you have much fraternizing with the Guamese or whatever they call themselves?
They're Guamanians. No,
Guamanians?
we didn't associate with them too much at all. I think most of their villages are all off limits to the GIs.
Oh.
And being that I was a reporter, I did have a special pass that I could go to these villages. And they were very good people, you know. They just very hospitable and what have you. And they still, as at that time, they still lived in these straw shacks in the small villages.
Were they typical of the natives you would see in the movies when you ended up on an island someplace,
I
or?
don't know if I had that relationship because you know, the movies they glamorize everything,
Yeah.
and it's not really reality.
So there were really uncivilized-like type villages that
They're all so you know they went through the Second World War, so they had an influence of the GIs
Okay.
there, and in fact is that one of the Marines that I got accustomed to, the World War II veteran, he was on Guam, and we traded stories. Of course, I was there 3 years after the wars ended, but there still was some sort of a relationship about the Guamanians and the GIs.
Were there any holdover incidents that from the World War II that?
Sure, there were Japanese that pulled out of the caves yet, and they survived on just going onto the fields and taking the vegetables and pineapples and what have you, and they crawled back. And
Many of them didn't even know the war was over.
Many of them didn't, and of course, the Japanese had a suicide pact. You know, it wasn't unusual for whole families to jump off. They had what they called a lovers' leap there, where a lot of them just jumped off the cliff and killed themselves because they didn't want to be. It was a mental type of a thing that was bestowed on them, that the emperor was a god-like figure, and they were given horror stories that if they were captured by the GIs, they'd be raped and they would be tortured and things of this nature. So rather than do that, whole families used to jump off these cliffs. They called them Lover's Cliff, Lover's Leap.
Tell us a little bit about Chuck Davis.
You know, Chuck Davis is a good friend of mine, and we palled around. He played baseball, I played baseball, but he didn't play football, and he was quite a nice guy. And he's from Montana, Dillon, Montana. And I recall he just before I left, he had some problems. It's just one of those things that happens to most everybody. That everything happens, just everything goes wrong for you. You know, it seems like whatever you do is not turning out to your favor. And I used to talk to him. Well, I was 19 years old, so what kind of advice could I give him? But I did contact him after the service, and I just kind of wondered what happened to him. Well, I found out that he went to the University of Montana, became a look and Collier's All-American in basketball.
Wow.
Married Miss Montana and had a bunch of kids.
Wow.
As far as I know, he still lives there.
Mhm. Somehow I'm still missing any training beyond just your typing.
Well, that's the
That
only
was
thing
the
I
extent of
had.
it, huh?
I had, that's the only training I had. Pretty much everything else was something I just picked up. And
What was the purpose of you being in Guam, the U.S.?
Well,
Was it kind of a peacemaker?
well, the island itself is a U.S. possession at that time, and it still is today. And it's quite strategically positioned, because during the Korean War and the Vietnam War, they had North Field, which housed was a home of the B-29s. It belonged to Korea and also Vietnam.
This group that you were with, this was a fairly big operation, all self-contained?
Well, it pretty much, yeah. There's pretty much, I'd say, most of the work was done clerical there. You know, it was just desk work type of work, and that's about it. And,
Were there practice missions that were run with the Air Force, or
I didn't understand it.
practice missions?
Not that I was aware of. The only missions I know is from the sports. That's
Yeah.
We always competed with the inter-service sports in baseball and also in football.
So you're really competing with yourself on the base?
Pretty much. You
Yeah.
know, well, that was an outlet for us. You know, the mile was only the island was only 30 miles long and 2 to 8 miles wide. So you had to have something there that would entertain the troops.
Hmm. Were there ways in which the troops could get away on R&R or some kind of off time?
Well, there was no conflict at that time. You know, you just what you did is you did what you were assigned to do, and you stayed there until your tour was over. That's all.
So, like a civilian in military clothing?
Pretty much so.
Yeah.
I did a little island hopping. I went to Saipan. I went to Tinian, where the
Oh, yeah.
first A-bomb was loaded up. And,
Yep.
and I was there. I seen the crater that they built to put the big boy in, and
Yeah.
the B-29s. And
Actually, the second one went out of there too, didn't
yes,
it?
I think it did.
Yeah.
You know. Well, the island was strategically positioned for Japan and all those smaller
Right.
countries around it.
Any relationship with Japan while you were there? I mean,
Not on Guam. I never got to Japan. The basketball team they had there was called the 100 Club. So each game they played, they scored 100 points, and they did go to Japan. But as a sports writer, for some reason, Captain Brinkley, who was in charge of the Stars and Stripes at the time, didn't permit me to go. So I never got any place other than going to Saipan and Tinian on my own volition.
okay, now you're finished with your activities at Guam, or your assignment, and now you come back, Fort Bragg, I guess?
Yeah, I took they give you a month's leave, and then I went to Fort Bragg, and I worked.
Did you go home before you?
Oh yes, I had a whole month's leave.
Tell us what that was like.
can't recall. It was just to go to get back home, I guess. You
I
know.
mean, what friends did you have after, what, a couple of years now, almost?
Yeah, well, they're still friends. A lot of them went into the service. And the fact is, I'm the only one that survived. All my buddies back in Pennsylvania is all passed on, and most of them all served in the service.
Mhm.
So it wasn't really much I did after I got back for a month. I really can't recall.
What was it like seeing your sisters after?
Well, that was good. Yeah, of course. You know,
Mhm.
because we were always in communications, even when I was in the service.
So you write?
We always wrote. I had a very good support system back home from the time I was in basic to all the way through Korea. I had my 3 sisters would write. I had a girlfriend at that time. And my mother, she was fluent in 3 different languages, and when she wrote in English, I could hear her voice, and she just wrote like she spoke.
Wow, that's neat. What were the languages she wrote or spoke?
Well, she knew English, she knew Polish, and she knew Croatian also.
Wow.
And I think that she learned Croatian because there were so many Croatian people in the town. And if you had to communicate, you had to learn the language. So she did that. And she was quite fluent in it. You couldn't tell. When you spoke to her and she spoke the Croatian, you would think that she was a pro.
Hmm. Go back over that for a minute again, when you got letters from her. And you said you could hear her talk.
Yeah. Just like her voice was there, and just all the way, all the letters that she wrote very good English too. And being that she had no schooling in that language, she did a good job.
That's quite unique. I've never heard that before from folks like yourself. That's kind of interesting. Also, coming to grips with what you had said earlier, when your parents spoke to you, they spoke to you in Polish, and then you'd speak back to them in English.
That's good.
But she thought enough to write you in English as
Yes, she
opposed to
did.
Polish.
Yes. I really don't know how she picked it up because both my dad and my mother read the newspaper. They both read newspapers. And even,
English?
yeah, English
Yeah.
newspaper. Well, my dad had Polish papers. He had also we used to get a daily paper, and I recall since he always raised chickens, and my mother never thought it was a profitable venture, but he liked his chickens, and he used to get I think it was a farm journal or something like that. Well, if he subscribed to the farm journal, I'm sure he knew how to read English. He got the daily paper also.
Well, I can certainly identify with that. During the war years, we lived in the city, and my father raised chickens in the garage.
Yeah.
So I can certainly relate to that.
And I reflect back when I was growing up, you know, the town was incorporated in 1798. Every house had a garden, they had a well, and they had an outhouse. And they're probably still there today.
Okay, so you're back in Bragg, now what's your assignment?
Oh, Bragg, I used to, I was worked on the camp paper there.
So you got back into the
Well, that's what I did.
literary business?
I worked on the camp paper, and it was kind of a short-lived assignment because I got there in '50, and of course the Korean War started in '50, June of '50. And my primary job was to write the sports that happened, and I used to travel with the 82nd Airborne sports participants to various camps. The 3rd Army field meets, they had the field meets, they had the swim meets, and they even had the Camp Lejeune field meets there it was good service. I had a sedan, I had a photographer with me. I mean, that was a big wheel.
When you came from Guam, did you come with your whole unit or just...
No, Doodles and I came. Because
That was it, eh?
Yeah, just the 2 of us.
So when you got to Bragg, it was a whole new...
Oh yeah, new experience, new people and everything else. Well, that's typical of the Army, I think. Well, maybe not today because with Afghanistan and Iraq, sometimes units go and they also come back as a complete unit.
Would other members of your unit on Guam have been shipped somewhere else then?
I would presume so.
So
I
you don't
really
know.
don't know, no.
You just
But I-
individually got your orders and
That's
just
right.
happened that you ended up with Doodles and,
Yeah, well, even after Guam, Doodles was shipped elsewhere. I don't know exactly where. I met him in Indian Town Gap, I think it was, after Korea. And he was assigned there, and I spent a weekend with him. But my stay at Indian Town Gap was very short, and that's when I was assigned to Fort Lee, Virginia.
okay, now you're back at Bragg and you gotta be on the south side of your enlistment.
Yes, well, I was, that's exactly right. And I didn't know the Korean conflict was going to start, so I was going to sign up for a correspondence school in Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, but that never materialized. And
I'm familiar with that.
so Korea started, and just so happened the unit I was in was alerted for Korean duty. So my
What do you think about that?
I thought it was an adventure until I got there.
Yeah. So where did you go from Bragg?
We took a troop train all the way to Fort Lewis, Washington, near Seattle, and I think that troop train must have been sidelined with everything that came by, because seemed like it took us an eternity to get there. You know, you didn't have all the accommodations. It wasn't exactly a Pullman type of a thing where you had beds and things like that, and so you just kind of accept those things.
How long did it take you to get there?
Seems like forever.
Couple of days anyhow?
Well, it took us probably a couple, 3 days
Yeah.
anyway. You know.
So where did you go from there?
Well, we went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and we became First Corps, I Corps headquarters there. So yeah, we spent there a few days, and back on a boat we went. And this time from Fort Lewis, we went the northern route to Japan, Yokohama. And I have to tell you, I've been on 3 boats before that, and the water was really rough, and I thought that there was more of a submarine than a ship.
Mhm.
And no one was on deck, and if you did get on deck, they had lifelines all around, and the people that first got on a boat or their first trip, they were seasick like you wouldn't believe.
Mhm.
And you wouldn't want to be down in the lower decks at that
There's
particular
no
time.
worse feeling in my experience than being seasick.
You wish you were dead.
Right, short of it. That's-
And I got a little queasy. Of course, on a troop ship, you had to stand to eat. You took your tray through the line and you stood and eat.
Are you getting seasick again?
And so if you forgot something, you had to go back to the chow line. You know, all of a sudden this old ship would list to one side, and all those trays come shooting down there, and you had all the food all over the floor. Well, if you wasn't sick before you got there, you were sick after you got there.
When you're in the chow, there's a trick to take 4 pieces of white bread and then press your plate down on it, and then your plate won't slide off.
You must have been
But
a
the
baby
food,
man.
yes, but the food will come off your tray, but the tray won't.
Well, it was an experience, I'll tell you. It was quite an experience anyway. I don't think I'd want to go through that again.
So, where did you end up?
Well, we spent a couple of days in Yokohama, and we were on leave there. And I know I went to the NCO club there with a bunch of guys, and we had a few drinks. And of course, you know, I was a teenager there, and the bartender says, "You're drinking this one zombie, the next one's free." So I drank one. I drank 2 zombies, and I'll tell you, well, my buddies got into the rickshaw, and they were hauled down to the ship. I ran. I got onto the ship, and I must have ran around that ship, I don't know, umpteen times to trying to sober up. I didn't get sick, but I really did have a swollen head the next day.
So, this obviously isn't the end of your trip.
No.
Where are you going now?
Well, we went to Korea. And,
South Korea?
We went to South Korea at the time. At that particular time, there wasn't much of the peninsula that was not invaded by the North, and what they call is the Pusan perimeter.
Yeah.
It was just a small tip of the
Yeah.
of the peninsula that was held by the Allies. And we got off the boat at nighttime, as I recall, and got onto a train, and they took us to Daegu. I think our first encampment was in the schoolyard there.
Mm-hmm.
And at Daegu, I was assigned guard duty. I never served as a guardsman because I was a lance corporal in basic, so I never was a guard. And the lieutenant posted me at it was 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, and right to the front gate, right near the general's office there. And my first encounter was a group of Koreans coming in, and they showed me all kind of passes. I wasn't never indoctrinated who was going to come there, so I threw a shell into my chamber, and I told them to halt, and I hollered out, and it must have been midnight, and I hollered out to Corporal Lagarde and whatever post it was. They came running out, and I found out that the South Koreans had the primary perimeter, and we were just in the secondary. But my post was right against the wall there, and I tell you, 12 o'clock at night, I seen all kind of faces over that wall.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a joke the next day, calling out the Corporal Lagarde, and everybody razzed me about that.
Let me see if I understand this now. You come off the boat, everybody's carrying rifles,
Oh yeah, we were all set.
and you're carrying a typewriter. How do you mesh?
Not really.
I mean, how do you mesh from being the,
I was assigned to G3 Plans and Operations, and there was a Captain Leonard, and we started a TI&E section, it's Training, Information, and Education section. And since I had some newspaper experience on Guam, he thought it would be a good idea to start a newsletter, a First Corps newsletter. So that's what we did. We started a First Corps newsletter. And he was the officer in charge, I was the editor, and a guy called Jack Lawton, a coal miner from West Virginia, was the co-editor, I should say. And we called the publication the Bullseye because the patch of the First Corps resembled a bullseye, so we called it that. It was quite an experience. I had a shortwave radio, a Zenith shortwave radio, and I used to tune into Japan, the Armed Forces Radio Service there.
yeah, this is good, this is good.
And
Who did you bump into on the radio?
well, there was a George Blaha. I don't know.
Where in the world did he come from?
There's a George Blaha that announces for the Pistons, I
Right.
believe. I don't think that's him, but it must be his son or somebody.
Probably was.
I don't really know. I tried to get a hold of him one time.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was him. I emailed the Pistons because I didn't know what. I never got an answer.
Yeah.
So that's anyway. I used to listen to and I write the news down. So
Uh-huh.
the news I put in the paper, the newsletter, the next day was just as fresh as it maybe even fresher than what you people got in the States here. I had all this news stories of the war. I had the scores of the pro and college ball, and you know, and it kind of, I think it was a good thing to have because this distribution was all through the whole I-Corps sector, and the people got a little bit of taste of home, you know, ball scores and a little bit of news and things of this nature.
Yeah, it's interesting how this thing evolves, that your contribution as a non-combatant was very significant for morale as well as keeping track of things.
Well, I
And,
hope,
and nobody really assigned this or saw this when you first enlisted, and you kind of just gravitated into it and filled that important role.
I just kind of fit into it.
Yeah.
Really good. I think it was a good service. Like, I was a non-combatant, and probably the reason I was a non-combatant because I joined the service so early and I already established myself. I know when I played ball on Guam, I got familiar with a lot of people. I got familiar with the coaches. Captain Hesenflow was a coach, and Lieutenant Andrews, who played fullback for Texas A&M. He was a medical officer, and I met him in Korea. And I asked him, I said, "You ever see any of the guys that coming through here?" He said, "Yeah." He said, he said, after you left, they cleaned all those islands out because the North Koreans started and they just threw these people onto the front lines. I said, these people had no combat experience. All they had is basic training, just like cannon fodder. He said he's seen a lot of it, and he said, and also since my name was in the I Corps, the bullseye. The word got around, and a lot of the guys that I was familiar with on Guam came up to see me. And there was that type of relationship we had. One of the guys that I served, two of the guys I served with, basically had a signal van, and they were encamped in one of our facilities at one time. And I went to see them. I forgot, but one guy was named Swain, but I can't remember the other guy's name.
Admittedly, you're a non-combatant, but in that position, how did you view the war?
It was terrible.
As a kind of an outside witness? Tell me about that.
It was absolutely terrible, the effects of the war. You had the refugees that coming down from the north. He said a lot of them in the wintertime just plain frozen to death. A lot of them died, and they just right on the side of the road. I think the most horrific thing I've seen is these people that were napalmed, and they were in this gross type of position. Just as they were crawling out, their bodies were charred. And the most...
And we're talking about women, men, children?
Well, that's true. As far as the refugees, and those are the ones that were suffered the most. I think the civilian population suffers more than the GIs do, or the soldiers that fight, because at least they have something to eat, and they're clothed. But these refugees leave everything at home. They just carry whatever essentials they have to have on their back.
How did the communists view authority?
Well, it's typical of any communist government is that they want to, when they invade a country, they want to get rid of the leadership, the academic, and the police and things, anybody of any authority, so that the people have no leadership and they can take over. And I found this out just outside of Tegu on a hilltop, and I went up there, and somebody said there was something going on, so my curiosity got the best of me, and I got into the Jeep and I went to this hilltop, and just as you hit the peak, you just see rows and rows of these people, just like they were in elongated rowboats. Their bodies were bloated, their hands were tied behind their backs, they're half buried, and they were all shot in the back of their head. And that was just those people. And then the whole valley was covered with bodies. They said there was something like 1,500 people there, and women there are wailing, and they found somebody they identified with, a relative perhaps, or a friend. And it's terrible. I really don't know why wars are started.
Well, you're certainly not seeing the better part of wars. You're seeing the worst of them.
Well, yeah, like I said, I wasn't a combatant, but I seen the effects of it, and that was really enough for me.
Your enlistment must be coming up. I mean,
Well, Truman gave me another year. I was sitting on a bunker one time, and
they call you by phone to tell you?
It was just understood, I guess it was. And I said in this bunker, I said, told Jack, I said, you know, he said, my enlistment's up, I shouldn't be here. But I served about 7 months of that year's enlistment, and none of it was in Korea, because I left pretty much after that, in the early part of 52.
Where'd you come back to?
I went back, well, I was temporarily assigned to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, and after that I went to Fort Lee, Virginia. And
You had some USO shows that I thought were interesting. Tell us about those.
yeah, really, first one that came, we just got into Korea. I think we were still in the Busan perimeter, and Al Jolson came there.
Huh.
And I don't know if a lot of people know who Al Jolson is today, but I think that was probably his last show that he performed, but I understood he died about 2 or 3 months after that show.
So what, 1951,
That was 50,
50?
1950. I think it was in the autumn of 50.
Mm-hmm.
We got,
Well, how old would he be then?
good Lord, I really
You
don't
remember
know.
what he looked like? Did he still?
Well, he was a short guy, kind of baldy hair, gray,
Yeah.
whatever gray he had, and he belted out his famous
Yeah.
songs and things like that. It was quite entertaining, yes, it was.
Now, this Jolson show was where?
I believe it was in Daegu, near the Busan perimeter.
All right, so you're still in Korea
Oh,
when that
yes, it was
happened.
in Korea, yes. Well, I've seen the Bob Hope show also.
I was gonna ask you, Bob Hope also, eh?
He had quite a show. He had these old golf
Golf
stick
club,
and everything. Golf club it was, yeah. And he brought this whole, you know.
Tell me about the girls.
Well, they're beautiful.
You
He had been away from home.
remember
all
which
that.
ones, anybody we know?
Yeah, it doesn't. Marilyn Maxwell somehow comes.
My gosh, good
He
gravy.
comes to mind, and I'm sure that
Oh.
Jerry Colonna was there too.
Of course, he was always there.
You know, my mind is a little fogged. It's been some time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting to be 81 years old, so but it was there were other shows, and one of our free times we had in Korea after we settled down, because we were on this is probably the latter part of 51 and 52 that we had some free time, and we used to pitch horseshoes. We got pretty good at horseshoes, and they had a man and wife team. This guy must have been a national, I think he was a national champion in horseshoes, and he and his wife entertained us. And I swear, every shoe he tossed was a ringer. It was unbelievable.
Mhm.
Well, some of the guys, well, the officers especially the ones that were hunters, during that lax period when the armistice was just about to be ready to be signed, of course they had a lot of rice fields and they had a lot of pheasants also, and so these guys used to go out there and hunt pheasants. So that was near the end of the conflict there.
Near the end of your stay in Korea, you got another promotion opportunity. What did you think about that?
Well, I was already sergeant first class, and Colonel Leonard, he was captain now. He's a light colonel. He made me an offer. He says, "I'll give you another stripe if you come to Japan with me." Well, he was a career officer. I wasn't a career
Now,
person.
what would that mean in terms of additional commitment? Another 2 years?
Well, I would presume. Well, I would think I'd have to re-up. You know, I probably would have had a hell of a good life with him, because
Yeah.
he was a hell of a nice guy, he's a Southern guy, and very congenial, very fair. You know.
And what do you think you'd be doing in Japan?
Well, I see all those geishas that I was.
Going back to what you had thought.
No, Japan was. I spent 5 days in R&R in Japan. It was back to civilization again. You know, the food was good.
Yeah.
And things like that, and the 5 days went quite fast. It really did.
So obviously you turned that down.
I did turn it down. I wanted to get home. I wasn't a military type of individual. I mean, if I was, I probably would have accepted Sergeant Henderson's offer to advance to infantry school.
So whatever the service did, it certainly told you that wasn't where you wanted to be.
That's correct. It did give me time to reflect on what I wanted to do, you know, and I've seen enough of people, and I've heard enough of people, and I thought that there was just something better than for me to do.
Now, you spoke of some medals. Can you tell us a little bit about the medals you won?
Well, the only medal I really won is the Korean Service Medal with five bronze stars, and the five bronze stars indicates the battles that were engaged in at that time, and also got the Army's Commendation Medal, and I would presume that it was for the stars, and not the stars and stripes, but the bullseye that I published, because
Okay.
The bullseye was awarded, I have to read this out, and it's quite interesting. And oh yes, it was the Armed Forces Press Service, and the bullseye won a honorable mention for general attractiveness, conformity to journalistic principles, readability, proper news balance, and makeup. And I thought that was quite well. That was something. I think I got the medal for that. It wasn't spelled out to me, but I think it was. And I thought that was quite a feat. That the bullseye itself conformed pretty much like a daily newspaper with the brochure that showed the actual headline, not the headline, but the place it was being published. You like to find the Detroit News or what have you, and then underneath that we had a headline, whatever the headline was, the most important thing that happened that day. And the news itself is as the war as it progressed, and also stateside news, the college, the sports results, and we also had a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
George Nader was a cartoonist, and he had a cartoon in our newsletter that was called Mac and Joe. And Mac and Joe were two characters in our unit there, and he never had any problem getting information from those two guys, because there was always something going on. So he had a little cartoon to strip in there for him.
So tell us a little bit about your discharge now. You get out of the service, where are you going?
Well, discharge, I got discharged out of Fort Lee. I was assigned as an office manager in Fort Lee. And since I enlisted for 3 years, I didn't have any reserve time to do. I took off. I was in Fort Lee, Virginia. I had a car that time. I went down to visit my godfather in Daytona Beach, Florida. I stayed with him for some time. After that little stint, I came home and...
How did you get in the jewelry business?
Well, I didn't get into jewelry. That's my godfather. He was a jeweler.
Ah, okay.
He was a jeweler and a self-made man. He took a correspondent. He was another immigrant from Poland, and became a very successful jeweler. And he was my role model. I had a better association with him than I think I did my dad. And we corresponded also while I was in the service.
So you took advantage of the GI Bill?
I took advantage of the GI Bill, yes, and I went to school in Cambridge Spring, Pennsylvania, and it was the Alliance College Technical Institute. And then at the time there was a lot of GIs there, and in particular there's 3 of them that I really hung up, and there was a John Goles that served in the U.S. Navy from Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Tom Malchusny, also a Navy man from Newcastle, and Leonard Jefkowski was a U.S. Army veteran, and he was also a Korean veteran from Menneson, Pennsylvania. I still keep in contact with John and Tom, and Leonard passed away a few years ago. And after the course at the Technical Institute was only a 2-year course, so we Tom and I decided to go to Chicago to get into the electronic field. And our way to Chicago, we stopped in Detroit, and to see Leonard, well, we never got to Chicago. He said, why do you have to go to Chicago? We had the schools here. So we stayed, we had an apartment, the three of us had an apartment for the longest time, and we both went to RETS, the Radio Electronic Television Schools, and that was a 2-year course also. Tom went to the DEW line in the Arctic and married after that, and me, I got married to my lovely, Julia Voitel, a fellow Pennsylvanian, a miner's daughter.
Well, now, how did you meet her? You never told us about her.
Well, we met in a bowling alley.
Okay.
The three of us, three guys were bowling at, I think it was, where was that? State Fair Bowling Alley? Yeah, that's where I met her there. Well, and after that, after we got married, I had a job at Remington Rand Univac and the computer people in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I worked in the lab. I worked on the electronics in the storage section of the file computer. And we stayed there for about 1.5 years, and Julia's mother needed some attention, so we moved back, and I got a job at Chrysler Missile. And, Chrysler as a quality control engineer, but that job didn't last too long. I covered I was writing test procedures for the electronic lab and also the harness lab there. And so then I got a job at U.S. River Company. It was now Uniroyal.
Yeah.
And I worked there as a research engineer for 27 years and retired.
Wow.
And we had 5 children, and we lost our oldest son, Mark, from the effects of diabetes when he was 18 years old.
Mm.
Well, I always felt that, I belong to the European and Pacific Stars and Stripes Association, and also the American Legion Post No. 1 in.
So you stayed with it after, to stay with your buddies, so to speak.
Well, they did. The two of them we're still in contact with. And,
So if you had to sum it up, how did you see your role in the service?
well, as far as the Stars and Stripes, I working as a sports writer there. I included as many names as I could as people that participated in sports, and those who excelled, I kind of mentioned them a little separately. And I thought that was really a morale booster for these kids, and especially if their folks back at home heard about their participation in sports or they excelled in sports. I'm sure that Mom and Dad was pretty proud of them. And as far as the paper I wrote in First Corps, here again, I think I gave the troops that we got our distribution, the latest news that there was as far as the progression of the war, stateside news, all the scores, and if they followed the scores. Some of them were probably college graduates, and they were interested in their particular college, how the college did, and things of this nature. So I think in that sense, I think I was quite proud of what I did and my accomplishments.
And for you personally?
Well, that is it. I think I contribute quite a bit, and I think that the service gave me more than I got from them. I really do.
You didn't take anything of your writing with you, but you filled a pretty important.
Well, I did take a few. I took the Stars and Stripes. We used to get these bundles of newspapers from Japan, and generally they were discarded because we had no. And I stuffed these before I left. I stuffed a bunch of them in my duffel bag, and I donated them to the Stars and Stripes Museum in Missouri.
But even in your business associations that followed the service, or even go back to your technical school in electronics, the writing skills must have been
Oh,
extraordinarily helpful.
Definitely. My school reports and term papers in college were just excellent. And as far as my writing in industry, technical manuals I wrote and proposal and field reports was just excellent. I mean, I had no problem detailing everything out.
Well, even the technical writing, which was quite a needed skill back then.
Still is.
Yeah.
Really. I always wanted to be a technical writer. I never accomplished that. But I think the writing experience I had in the service, I'm a family historian. And I write about the family for about 8 years. I published a triannual type of a journal, and I formatted it as I did the bullseye. So I think it was really professionally done. And I think, as I said here, I truly believe that I received more from the service than I gave. I really do.
Your final comment is quite poignant. You want to read that to us?
Yes. In conclusion, I'd like to say that may the good Lord bless and protect those in harm's way, wherever they may be. And may God bless this fantastic country we live in.
Great. Thank you very much.
Done. Well,
I appreciate it.
well, thank you. How do we do?
You get an A.
Not an A plus?
Well, we don't have plus and minuses there, so you're at the.
I always had an interest in things like that, and well, maybe it's a rub-off. My uncles in Poland were all engineers. And so maybe it's in my blood, maybe I inherited that trait, but I was always good at fixing things and things like that, and always good in physics and mechanics, and even the school attended technical school, we had our math, we had our English, all the way up to calculus, and we had drawings, geometry, drawings, tool design, and also machine shop. So yeah, I got a good fundamental of what mechanics are all about.
So even though you obviously did really well as an editor and as a reporter while you were in the military, it made you realize how much you missed the engineering side of it, the technical side
I
of
don't
it.
know if I really missed it because I really wasn't exposed to it at that particular time, but I never had a problem getting up in the morning and go to work. Never, ever. And I always had a plan in mind, a goal set in my mind before I went to work. And at times that those goals were never met because there's always intervening things that happen. But I did always have goals. I still have goals. Even today, before I get up in the morning, I plan my day out. But Mrs. Tomsic has other plans sometimes.
They need to be mingled in.
Right. Well, she's the top priority right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
How much of this period of your life have you shared with her?
Oh, you mean from the time of the service? Well, we have an understanding, not an understanding, but even when I was a kid, my dad and father had friends in a small mining community in Pennsylvania called New Mine, and periodically we used to visit, at least once every year. Not that I knew of it. She just lived over the hill. We didn't meet till years after that. So she's a coal miner's daughter too. And I think that's the gelatin or the glue that keeps us together because we have similar backgrounds. We come from practically nothing. In fact, my wife comes from less than I had because her father was killed. Was 42?
He died from an accident,
42?
mining accident. He was
So
42 years old.
her mother raised 7 kids by herself.
Wow.
Tough. You didn't have all the welfare today you have today. So She did the wallpaper, made moonshine and everything else to keep the family together.
Moonshine?
My mother did.
You know this is going to the federal government?
But
Statute of
if you use it-
limitations is out.
but if you use it for your own consumption,
Right.
it's okay, right? But times are tough, you know,
Yeah.
you have all the welfares like that, all these assistants you have there, you know, we had borders too. I mean, most of these people that came from these foreign countries were all bachelors.
Yeah,
They had to have a place to stay, somebody had to feed them, somebody had to make their lunches and things like that, you know, and, we had borders ourselves, and, but it was just those times, and many of these immigrants that came over, they were already married. And they left their wives and families back in the old country. They figured they'd get a job here, make enough money, and have them come over, you know. But what happened is the Second World War happened, and that stopped everything. Well, by the time the war was over, they brought a lot of these women and kids over. Well, they didn't like this country, you know. And that time span between when they were there and when they came to this country was so long, they were just like strangers. A lot of them just went back.
was there ever a concern on your part that once your 7 months expired, that they would up it again?
I don't understand.
Well, you said that Truman extended your
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah,
Were you concerned, because we're right in the middle of the Korean War, were you
Well-
concerned they may up it again?
No, I wasn't concerned. I just took it as it came. I didn't dwell on things like
It came,
that.
it came, huh?
But I really feel sorry for these guys. They're in the reserves or in or just the regular army or whatever, or the National Guard that are married and they join these units to maybe have a better life for them, get an education, find out that we have Iraq and Afghanistan, and
Yeah.
these units are pulled out in its entirety and away from their families. You know, it's gotta be a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
There's gotta be a lot of stress involved.
Sometimes the women with small kids are
It's terrible.
pulled out,
Terrible.
sometimes both.
Yes, right. It's not a very healthy situation. I really feel sorry for these people, I really do. My extension was for 7 months, and I thought that was something great, but I was single, you know, I had no concern. But I just took it in stride, I said, that's what happened, and I just accepted. There wasn't anything I could do about it anyway,
True.
you know. But the service was a good experience. I really grew up. You know, I was somewhat of a hellion anyway when I grew up, and my mother felt that I'd never survive my teenage years.
Well, you know, that's a very critical period for a lot of us.
Oh, everybody.
That gap that forms between the high school supervision to an open bowl of soup, and then all of a sudden, if you're lucky, you catch on and
Yeah.
start making your way in the world, and that gap sometimes filled by the service is another form of discipline and direction, and
It's kind of tough. You know, you want to be independent and responsible, and you can't afford to be that way.
if you're lucky, it's in times of peace. If you're not lucky, why,
Yeah.
you learn faster.
I think Senator Kerry had it right, and of course there was a lot of controversy about this. If you don't have an education, you're going to end up in Korea, or not Korea, but Afghanistan.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that,
Wow,
because
that's
the
true.
economy as it is today,
That's right.
you can't get a job, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What can you do?
Okay, ladies, thank you.
I just gotta
All this extra
push that
stuff is all
little
recorded
green button
too?
and you
Yep.
can try to